Jesus who taught that whenever we care for the hungry, the sick, the imprisoned, the stranger, we care for him. Simple Gifts was played at Scott and my wedding 39 years ago, so thus the quaver in my voice. I want to say two things before I read this morning's text. The first is that this passage from Hebrews is quite graphic. So if you're at all squeamish, the descriptions of persecution are gonna be uncomfortable. The second thing I want to say is that there will almost certainly be people mentioned in this text that you do not know. Jephthah, for example. Resist the urge to Google Jephthah's name for the next few minutes, if you would. I have an alternative for you. Bill Tipping will be doing a disciple Bible study class this fall, and I'm sure, Bill, that there will be conversation about Jephthah, yes? A lot. Bill says you will talk about Jephthah a lot. Hear now these words. By faith, the people passed through the Red Sea as if it were dry land. But when the Egyptians attempted to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute, did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had received the spies in peace. And what more should I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions. I love that part. Shut the mouths of lions, quenched raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, won strength out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies into flight. Women received their dead by resurrection. Others were tortured, refusing to accept release in order to obtain a better resurrection. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in the skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and in caves and holes in the ground. Yet all these, though they were commended for their faith, did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better, so that they would not, apart from us, be made perfect. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who, for the sake of the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. This Cokesbury hymnal, copyright 1923, is from Wesley Chapel United Methodist Church in Free Union, Virginia. The cover is no longer attached. The corners are dog-eared and crumbling. And on the first page is a typed memorial sticker that has a mistake. It says, "In memory of my husband, Joseph D. Maupin," only the D has been made into a G with the faintest mark of a pencil. "In memory of my husband, Joseph G. Maupin, Nanny E. Maupin." Joseph and Nanny were my great-grandparents. I have no memories of Joseph. He died long before I was born. And my memories of Nanny are limited, the kinds of things a young child notices. The compression stockings she wore that made her legs look strange. The walker she leaned so heavily on when she got up from the chair. And the few wisps of hair she had remaining that made her look more like my baby brother than any adult I knew. Now, 60 years later, when the doctor has recommended that I wear compression socks, and my right knee can catch and make me hobble, and my hair is falling out in handfuls in the shower, I find myself thinking about my great-grandmother much differently. Much, much differently. What I'm thinking about is how she endured, but not just the vicissitudes of aging. Grandma Nanny also endured a lifetime of poverty. The grueling, red clay, rocky soil poverty of her family's subsistence farm in Virginia. A poverty made worse by the death of her husband when he was still a young man. She would go on to live 45 years without Joseph. What Grandma Nanny also endured was the sudden death of her son, Thomas, my grandfather, of a brain aneurysm. And 2 days later, the death of her daughter, Frances, of a heart attack. Endurance isn't a particularly pleasant word. It's not like a lot of words we use in the church. Words like love and joy and peace and kindness and generosity. These words inspire and uplift. Endurance, by contrast, stumbles along, often bone-weary and heart-sore, stubbornly clinging to its faith. The Hebrews passage we read this morning is a hymn to endurance. Again and again in this letter, the author encourages us to remember what people before us have gone through, to draw strength from their example, and thereby to face what we have to face, to hold fast, to persevere. What Grandma Nanny endured, as is true for any of us, went beyond the challenges and tragedies of her immediate family. Wars and their aftermath were an all too present reality for her. Born a mere 18 years after the end of the American Civil War, Grandma Nanny would go on to live through the Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and much of the war in Vietnam. The point is that what my great-grandmother endured wasn't just what was happening on her hardscrabble Virginia farm. The larger context of the nation and the world impacted her too, as did the larger context of her family history, what had happened generations before, a trauma her family carried deep in their bones. Even as a young child, I was told how both Grandma Nanny and Grandpa Joseph were descendants of French Huguenots. Our family used to live in France, my dad would tell me when I was still young enough to perch on his knee. And his face would grow serious as he went on, but they started being killed because of what church they were a part of, and they had to flee. One of our relatives even stole a horse to get enough money to buy a ticket on the ship that sailed from France to Virginia. The part about stealing a horse was always thrilling as a child. A horse was so big, how could you possibly steal one and get away with it? I was less clear about why anyone would want to hurt you for the stories we read in Sunday school, the songs we sang, the vanilla wafers and grape Kool-Aid we were served afterwards. The author of the book of Hebrews has no such naivete. He is clear that violence has long been directed at people of faith. They were stoned to death. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in the skins of sheep and goats, destitute, persecuted, tormented. Such references to persecution can seem distant and irrelevant, especially as we sit in this grand and glorious 150-year-old sanctuary. And yet we need look no further than Melissa Hortman to know that faithful people, people who teach Sunday school, live by the golden rule, and are described as a great shining light of a human being, can be gunned down. Yes, of course, she was a high-profile political figure. We, by contrast, are much less known, our beliefs less visible. But in these days of extreme polarization, the danger is real to our bodies and to our souls. One New Testament professor says that what the book of Hebrews is ultimately about, and I quote here, is the formidable task of remaining faithful in a society that rejects their commitments. Yes, that's exactly it. You and I are facing the formidable task of remaining faithful in a society that increasingly rejects our commitments to a Jesus who says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," a Jesus whose heart overflowed with compassion, a Jesus who taught that whenever we care for the hungry, the sick, the imprisoned, the stranger, we care for him. How heavy it all seems as bombs are dropped, empathy is ridiculed, the sick are denied health care, and our neighbors are rounded up. But here is precisely where the book of Hebrews urges us on. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. My friend Dana says that when she feels exasperation, she looks for inspiration. That's what the author of Hebrews does too. Overwhelmed by how followers of Jesus were being targeted, the author makes a list of faithful people who inspire him. Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, the prophets, people he describes as so great a cloud of witnesses. So great a cloud. I believe that it's not just people from the pages of Scripture who are in that great cloud of witnesses. People we have personally known are there too. I think this morning not just of my great-grandmother, I also think of two members of this church I was privileged to meet shortly before they died. Kin Jensen, lying peacefully in her bed, hearing everything that was said to her, and occasionally marshaling the strength to speak herself. At the threshold of death, she said to her daughter Mathy and I, "I'm open." And Jean Jetson, sitting in her wheelchair with an extraordinary smile on her face. "It's a great life if you're up for it," she said. How powerfully both Kin and Jean lived, even at the end of their lives, with openness and with joy. So great a cloud. I think of others in this congregation who are still living, but are ahead of most of us in this race that is set before us. Like Ada Rivers, who turned 100 4 days ago. Ada not only has grandchildren and great-grandchildren, she has great-great-grandchildren. A registered nurse, Ada hasn't limited her caring work to the hospital. She faithfully served community meals here at this church. She worked as a volunteer at the Greater Lake Country Food Bank. She started a children's garden in Theodore Wirth Park along with her husband, J.D., and she was extremely politically active, so much so that she and J.D. hosted Walter Mondale in their home, and she danced at Jimmy Carter's inaugural ball. What's your secret to living such a good, long life, I ask? I start every day the same way, Ada said, with a little prayer, a little breakfast, and a little exercise. And when things are hard, I give it to God. So great a cloud. I think also of Marie Hard, who turned 99 in April. Although Marie has never been formally trained, she has the innate skills of her architect grandfather. Marie, out of her great love for this church, took frames that were no longer needed in our art gallery and also a Sunday school classroom door, and she made them into windows and a back door in her house. My life has been in the church, Marie says, and the church is in my life. So great a cloud. Finally, I think of Ruth Bartholow, who will turn 99 this Tuesday. Living in a memory care unit now, with much of her ability to speak gone, Ruth can still sing, "Jesus Loves Me." Her voice quavers. It's hard for her to get enough breath. But still, she sings. Still, she sings. Which brings me back to this Cokesbury hymnal. The cover no longer attached, the corners dog-eared and crumbling, the typed memorial sticker with a mistake. I love this hymnal precisely because it's marked by the imprint of generations. So great a cloud, so great a singing cloud. If you are feeling discouraged this morning or overwhelmed, if you're feeling fearful for your own health or the health of this nation, if you're facing challenges that you simply don't know how you're going to get through, look toward this great cloud of witnesses and join their song.